If you've ever ended a relationship, taken some time, felt like you did the work, met somebody new, and then found yourself 6 months later in the exact same situation with a completely new person, then this video is for you. Because what you experienced was not bad luck, and it wasn't a coincidence. And it wasn't technically because you have terrible taste in people. It's because you were always taught to look at people individually and not as a pattern. And you've probably heard people say, you attract what you are. And I do think there's like maybe a little bit of truth in that, but I do think it's more specific and more uncomfortable than that, because I genuinely believe you attract what you think you deserve. Shout out perks of being a wallflower. And I kind of think that the two ideas do correlate with each other, but there is like a little bit of a gap between the two. By the end of this episode, you are going to understand exactly why you keep ending up in the same situation with a new person. You're going to be able to see your own patterns very clearly, and you're going to have something to do about it starting today. Before we get into it, if you don't know me, my name is Haley. I'm on a mission to become my best self. I'm obsessed with all things healing, fitness, and productivity, and this is Healing with Hale. In this season, we are focused on escaping toxic environments, so all episodes are geared towards helping you find your way out of whatever toxicity surrounds you. And honestly, if you keep attracting the same toxic person over and over again, that is as trapped as it gets. So let's get into this. We are going to cover this in 3 parts: where the pattern actually comes from, because I don't think people understand the real root of it, then what it looks like while you're inside of it, so you can start catching it in real time, and then what to do to actually break free from the pattern. So the real reason this is happening is technically not your fault, but it is your problem. And it's not because you have bad taste in people, it's because your nervous system was trained before you were even old enough to have any say in it. And this is important to understand because I think it takes a little bit of the shame out of it. Like, you didn't necessarily choose this pattern, you kind of just inherited it. And you're drawn to people not because they're good for you, but just because they feel familiar, because they match something that you learned to recognize as normal a very long time ago. And the place that most of us learn what a relationship looks like is from the one that we grew up watching the most up close and personal. So whatever dynamic you grew up around is the one that your brain filed away as like the norm. When we grow up and we start choosing our own people, we're not necessarily looking for that blueprint, but something inside of us is looking for that blueprint, because familiar feels safe even when it's not safe. And learning the difference between familiar and safe is a very important part of healing this. Because when I tell you, my ex so clearly did not like me. Like, that man did not care if I lived or died. This man never told me he loved me, constantly canceled plans on me. He was always finding ways to make me feel small. And I remember so many times where I would literally think to myself, like, I do not want to be in a relationship like this. And then we were together for 2 more years. And for a long time, I couldn't understand why I stayed so long. And then I finally realized that that dynamic pretty much directly mirrored the one that I watched growing up. Like, when he would pull away or cancel plans or like not say that he loved me, I didn't see any red flags in that, because I was just like, oh, this is like what relationships are, because that's what the blueprint that I grew up around taught me. And unfortunately, I think like pick better partners is one of the most useless pieces of advice that people can give. And I think that when people say that, they genuinely think that like you're going out on purpose to pick bad people, which is obviously not the case for most of us. So you do have to look at what you grew up around and what you normalize and really ask yourself, like, is this something that I actually want to repeat? And this is where it really ties into like you attract what you think you deserve. Like, if you look at that relationship of your parents or like of whoever you grew up around and you think, yes, this is what I deserve, then you are going to keep repeating that pattern. But if you look at it and you go, I know that I deserve more than this, that is where the true progress is going to start. So how do you know if you are repeating the cycle or not? The first signs are what I consider like yellow flags. It's that very beginning of something where like you're not really quite sure where you stand, and something about that like roller coaster almost like keeps us engaged, like it keeps us anxious all the time. And a lot of times we call this like butterflies, when really it's just anxiety. And your nervous system has just learned to read anxiety as like butterflies and excitement, because that's the environment that it grew up in. And the pattern usually looks a little something like this, you know, give or take a little bit. You meet something about them feels like electric or like uncertain, like maybe they're a little bit mysterious, and then you find yourself working probably way harder than you should to try to keep their attention, keep things interesting. And the more invested you get, the harder it is to see what's happening clearly. And then by the time that their dynamic starts to feel familiar to you, like maybe them being hot and cold, canceling plans, any subtle way that they're starting to make you feel like you're maybe a little bit too much, at that point you're already attached. And now leaving feels like you would be losing, even though what you would be losing was never actually giving you what you needed. And I personally think the reason I stayed in my ex relationship so long was that I, like, at 2 years in, was just like, well, I've already spent 2 years with this person, like, I might as well just keep going. And you add that to the fact that this was something that felt normal to my nervous system almost. That altogether kept me in something that was quite literally giving me PTSD. And I think the uncomfortable part is that sometimes we stay not because we don't see what's happening, but because leaving requires us to believe that we actually deserve something better. And if that belief that you deserve better isn't solid yet, then if you were to get in a relationship with someone who actually shows up for you and actually treats you well consistently, it's actually going to feel really suspicious. Like, you're going to constantly be like, when is this going to blow up? Like, what's going on? Like, oh my god, I don't trust this. And that's because you've never had a reference point for what like a true, stable, calm relationship looks like. And so to you, calm doesn't feel like love, it just feels boring. Okay, so now let's dive into the practical part. And real quick, I want to mention that this whole season is filled with a bunch of practical tips like this one. So if you're getting something out of this video, I would love if you subscribe so that you can continue clearing out your toxic environments with me. Step number 1 is to name the feeling, not the person. So you want to grab a piece of paper and write down all of the relationships that like have actually really hurt you, and then ignore everything about who this person is, what they did, whatever. Just write down how you felt during this relationship. So you're not writing down like, he was so hot and cold. You are just naming how you felt during it. Like, I always felt like I was one step away from doing something wrong and losing him. And when you do this, you're going to notice that across these relationships, you might have some patterns of feelings that are going to repeat over and over. And once you can name those feelings, then you actually have something concrete that you can start to look for in future relationships. Step number 2 is kind of obvious, but you want to find where you learned this from. So once you've named that feeling, trace it back. Try to figure out, when did you first feel this exact feeling? And I mean, when did you feel this in like a family sense? Like, who is the person in your family that made you feel like this? Or did you watch someone who feels like this? And then try to ask yourself, what did I decide about love based on what I watched? Step number 3 is to build your standards before you actually need them. And this is actually something I did when I first started with my old therapist. And I wrote like a huge non-negotiable list of like everything that I actually knew was something I needed in a partner. And it's important to do this while you're completely clear-headed and like not attached to anybody, because you don't want a certain person influencing what you write down on this list. And I know when we're little, we all think about like, I want my future husband to be tall and to have blue eyes and to like have a six-pack, like all of those things. That is not what we are writing on this one. Like, you might write down a non-negotiable as someone who follows through on plans, someone who can apologize without making it about themselves, someone who never makes me feel stupid for having feelings. That was actually like a very big one that I wrote down. And because these are things that you can actually observe and you can like think about whether or not this is a trait that the person that you're seeing actually has or doesn't have. And the more specific and like behavior focused your list is, the harder it's going to be for you to talk yourself out of it in 3 months when you're already attached, because you can look at this list and be like, ooh, yeah, he really doesn't do that for me. Or like, ooh, they do cancel plans on me all the time. The sooner you can write this when you're clear-headed, the better it is going to work for you when you're confused in 6 months. See, this pattern that you've been following is not like a life sentence to have bad partners forever. It's just something that was taught to you. And you can slowly over time work your way through to get out the other side and not have this be your default option anymore. Your task for this episode is that non-negotiable list, and I want you to share it with somebody in your life who can actually hold you accountable to this, because that is the most important part. Because the moment that you're going, well, no, I know my list says this, but like, he actually, like, he does this instead. Like, the moment you start trying to talk your way out of that list, you need to have somebody who can be like, bitch, shut the fuck up. This is not what we talked about. Like, you know this is not your man. If this episode hit close to home for you and you recognized a feeling that you felt in a lot of your relationships, please comment it below, because it might be the wake-up call that somebody else needs to actually move on from this pattern that they're repeating. Until next time, be kind to your mind, to your body, and to others, and happy healing.